Welcome to Talking Funny Cars with Buddy Hull. And boy, do we have a special guest today. I'd like to welcome on Ron Capps, NHRA three-time Funny Car World Champion. How are you, sir?
I love the sound of that.
Yeah, sounds great, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Can't imagine that feeling.
I used to say the same thing. I had won, a lot of races before the championship, and I kept getting asked about when are you finally going to win a championship. So yeah, the first one was great. The second two back-to-back were pretty cool.
Welcome to the show. Happy to have you on.
This is cool.
Yeah, it's an
I
honor.
watch this channel all the time. We have company over. The channel runs all the time. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah. Well, we want to know a lot about Ron Capps. We want to learn.
You
want
sure
to tell,
about that?
Oh, maybe not. I don't know. It depends, right? We won't go too deep, right?
Yeah.
But we want the fans to hear a lot about Ron Capps, and they need to find out things about our drivers that they don't know otherwise. And so that's why we're here. So how'd you get into funny car?
Yeah. It's funny. I didn't just get it. Obviously I grew up in the sport. My dad raced on a local level. Got my first shot to drive an alcohol dragster, John Mitchell, the Montana Express.
I remember.
Roger Prim and Terry Manzer, his crew chief, had this list of legendary drivers. I mean, Gary Beck and Selzy and Rance McDaniel and all these guys. And they were looking to go after a sponsor with Roger Prim's top fuel car, and I got picked. I kept getting these calls. The list is down to 15s, down to 10s, down to 3. And so I drove that for a year and a half, my rookie year. And then I got this call from Don Prudhomme. And hey, kid, you want to drive a funny car kind of thing? And I hung up on him, and his wife called back. But long story short, that was the reason. But I grew up a funny car guy. A kid growing up, I loved fuel altereds and funny cars. That was my thing.
What do you mean you hung up on Don Prudhomme? We got to talk about that for a minute.
Well, Larry Dixon kept saying that he'd be at dinner with sponsors, and my name kept coming up at dinner, and I thought he was BSing me. So I was, and then one day I got a phone call, and I thought, everybody, hey man, everybody does this impression of Snake,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, certain way.
And I thought it was a friend playing a joke, because I'm like, what is he doing calling me? And I hung up, and his wife Lynn called back and said, Ron, did you have a problem with your phone? And I said, was that really Snake? And so
amazing.
she said, yeah, hang on, let me get him on the phone. So that's kind of how that happened, believe it or not.
Oh, that's fantastic. And what a great way to start your career. But as you moved through your career, you drove for legends. You drove for Don Prudhomme. You drove for Don Schumacher. And then the story be told, you became a team owner, right? And so what a blessing. But, maybe tell the world out there the difference between being a team owner versus driving for somebody, what the differences are.
Well, throughout those years, I always thought about if I was a team owner, how in this certain situation. And listen, to get the phone call from Snake was cool. To sit in a rental car with him and Mario Andretti, my first big deal, I went to SEMA to go to dinner with Mario and Snake and Bobby Unser and all those kind of moments were something. As a kid, I wanted to call all my buddies and my dad and everybody and go, you will not believe where I'm at right now.
Yep.
It was those moments a lot. But it was the crew chiefs also. Like I had Roland Leong early on. He really molded me to be a racer, a funny car racer, not necessarily a driver. Ed the Ace McCulloch. I mean, the list goes on. Dale Armstrong I got to work with. And then you fast forward to now. So I always had those moments of, in this situation, how would I, and a lot of it was, how would Don Prudhomme handle it? That's lately is how I approach it. But getting to drive for those two guys really taught me a lot of what to do and what I thought maybe I could do better down the road. And I have way more envy for Cruz Pedregon, for Tim Wilkerson, all the owners that have been doing it on their own with a one-car team now that I don't sleep much at night as a team owner. So yeah, it's been fun, but it's been educational.
Well, you were certainly, quote unquote, raised into the right pedigree. I mean, let's face it, Prudhomme, Schumacher, two of the best team owners of all time. Schumacher had the most winning drag racing team of all time. So for you to have that tutelage it's just amazing.
Yeah. I still can't believe it. I'm lucky. I mean, it was, again, going to NASCAR races and walking in the pit area and being invited into Dale Sr.'s motorhome and Richard Petty's and just those pinch me moments. But what was cool was Snake had really relaxed a little more in life because I would have Mongoose. The day would end and you would go sit in our little hospitality area and have a beer, and there would be Raymond Beadle and Tom McEwen and just these legendary people around shooting the bull. And I got to hear these stories that were really rated R, but you only read them as a kid in Hot Rod Magazine rated, G.
Yep.
So So I really got, they all told me the same thing. Every moment I got with somebody like that, Mongoose would say, man, it's a good thing this wasn't 10 years ago or 20 years ago and you're driving for Snake, because he was definitely a different person. So yeah, he texted me this morning, actually.
There you go.
Yeah, he, growing up, my mom saved a rule book, NHRA rule book from 1973, I think it is. And I remember it, believe it or not, I was 7 or 8 years old. And I went up to him eating breakfast, and there used to be this breakfast place at the old Rancho Bakersfield Inn. It was this place everybody stayed at. And at night, you left the track. There was no pit area work going on at the racetrack back then. You'd go back to the hotel, and every big-name team had their rigs backed in. They're washing parts in the sink in the bathtub of their rooms, and they're working on the car in the parking lot of the hotel. That's where you went. That was the coolest thing. So going through all these moments with Snake, working for him, the first phone call when I hung up on him and his wife called me back, and then he asked me, hey, man, I'm thinking about adding a team to Larry Dixon's Top Fuel team. Would you want to drive a funny car? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I told him I'd drive his motorhome. I'd drive anything for him.
That's right.
And then I had to borrow money for a sport coat or a suit, because I didn't even have one to go meet these proposed sponsors. So they wired me money, and I went and bought my first suit. And then we flew back east and met him, and he called me 2 weeks later and said, we got the deal. You're going to be Copenhagen. So those are the big moments. And that leads up to the Indy throwback car moments, where I was able to, 50 years ago, when he had that car at Indy, that epic moment, to do that again with him there. It was like this full circle thing. And, he checks on me daily, if not every other day, just on everything. You okay with the business? You need any help? His wife, Lynn, ran theirs, anything you need. So, you couldn't ask for somebody better, bigger, cooler to help or offer help.
Yeah. The mentorship that you have with him has got to be priceless.
It is. But,
all these years of driving these funny cars, how many years has it been now, by the way?
This year, 2024, the Phoenix race was 30 years.
30
driving
years.
Professionally in NHRA. My debut was Roger Prim's dragster, qualified 13th or something, had Joe Amato, right? The Mr. Top Fuel, first round, and beat him. Left on him, probably rolled it in. But I left on him, and I think he smoked the tires, and I hadn't yet made a full run through that whole weekend. I was still a little afraid of the car when the clutch locked up, and I wasn't sure if something was going wrong or if the car was just starting to haul ass. So, and it was just starting to haul ass, Terry Manza, the crew chief, said. But that was my debut, and 30 years ago this year.
Wow, 30 years. And so 29 of those driving a fuel funny car.
Yeah, a year and a half, 95 and half of 96 before the Snake call happened. So we were looking for a sponsor with Roger Prim.
Of course.
He said, look, if we don't get one by the Sonoma race, this is 96, go ahead and do what you want. And I just gotten the Snake call about a week before that, and I was torn. I didn't want to upset or leave somebody that put me in a Top Fuel car, yet I had this opportunity with Don the Snake Prudhomme. So it's a bummer we didn't get a deal, but it turned out to be probably the best thing in my life.
Yeah, you don't say no to Don Prudhomme, right? What has that funny car taught you?
Well, you're in for a treat. That's a great question. It more than anything, the first thing that pops up in bold letters in front of my eyes is humility, because I can't tell you how many times. I mean, I've won 70 something races, right, in funny car. There is still moments why I'm sort of comfortable and I'm like, okay, we got this round, or the car's running good. I'm gonna be good. The car's gonna be good on this run, and then it does a funny car thing, which is cylinder out, or it makes a move left or right, which they do every run. There's never a perfectly straight run, and then it teaches you you're never okay. You're very lucky that the laid-back header days were unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, you think you're digging the funny car, and you don't know what's going to happen next, right? It was one of these moments before you stage the car, because you look down the track with the laid-back headers, and you're like, I just want to get between the cone and the wall, and the best of the best. There was no guarantee. John Force, Robert Height, some of the best drivers. We had no idea if we were going to get it down through there. So it's still, they're hard, they're difficult, but humility is more than the biggest thing that stands out.
Yeah, well, and those funny cars will absolutely teach you those lessons over and over.
Every run.
I never drove a funny car with laid back headers, but you did, and a lot of it. And so, the fans, I know they want to hear about that era because those cars, I mean, they were so unpredictable during that time. So maybe explain a little bit about what that was like.
Yeah. Crazy to the point where I almost came to blows with my crew chief, Ron Tobler. And come to find out, I've talked to other drivers that had the same scenarios with their crew chiefs, which is an unbelievable relationship that we have as funny car drivers, right? That crew chief and that driver relationship. But the laid back headers pose so many issues as a driver. I mean, it was hang on for dear life. You don't know where it's going. You don't know what's going to happen. I remember making a run in Bristol and it hit one of those bumps and it carried the front end 450 feet in the air after the clutch locked up. And we were low ET. Yeah, it was right lane,
Yep.
Night run. And I got on the radio and said that was the most scariest thing I've ever done in my life, but the coolest thing because it landed him and we went to number one spot, but it was, you just didn't know if you were going to make a run without touching the wall or hitting the center line. So it was nuts, man.
And during that era is when we started to see the mile per hour really come up, right, on the cars. And I'm sure when you guys got out of those way laid back headers, you're probably like, man, this thing's like driving a Cadillac now, right?
It was at first, yeah. And I was a little bummed because there were some articles that came out on the internet and they got these opinions from these part-time drivers that weren't full-time drivers on the tour, and they were complaining about this and that. And to the point where I wanted to come out and go to all these publications and say, look, listen, it's the most unbelievable thing because a funny car should be something you don't know if you're going to make it to the finish line.
That's right.
That's when I was growing up as a kid, that was what funny cars were. So, and now I get to drive fuel altereds every year at the March meet, and it reminds me every single run of a funny car with laid back headers.
In all your years of funny car, what do you love about fuel funny cars?
Oh, they're just, I'm taking this from Don Prudhomme. It's one of the sexiest looking race cars on the planet. Just the way it sits, notwithstanding 12,000 horsepower, right? But I mean, just there's something utterly sexy about it. I mean, you drop the body down and there's nothing like a good looking funny car. And, you take it a step further and you talk about the driving part. I've gotten lucky enough to go test with IROC. I've driven some NASCAR stuff, sprint cars and midgets. And every time I go do it with some of the best drivers in the world, I come back. But when I have conversations, I'm like, this is great. But there is nothing on planet Earth like a top fuel funny car. Nothing. It is the craziest, most unnerving, evil handling race car on the planet.
I have to agree, because I started my career in fuel altereds and kind of driven a lot of things in between there and spent a lot of time around hot rods and drag cars. And when that funny car is sitting on the ground, the body's down, it's just the coolest thing in the planet.
Yeah.
There's nothing more American, right? And people can identify, right? They got their pick. They got a Toyota, or they got, a Dodge, or they got a Ford, or they got a Chevrolet. So it's kind of cool how, unlike the dragsters, fans can still really relate to the type of car that we're actually driving a little bit.
Yeah, and I rib my counterparts, our counterparts in top fuel dragster, and I drove one, so I'm in the same boat.
Same.
But when you're sitting out in that cockpit and it's wide open, there's nothing in front of you, you're waiting for some guy's finger to tell you to roll forward to do the burnout. My favorite, and I've talked about this many times, my favorite part of a run isn't the run. It is that moment when you're sitting there and your team is all surrounding and you're the next car up.
Yep.
And you're sitting there with all the people to put this together. And it's like you're going to battle and you see everything in front of you. There's a big engine in front of you. There's your crew guys all standing around. The crew chief is last minute reaching down and doing things, talking on the radio. I love that moment. And you take that a step further, those world championship moments at Pomona on a Saturday or Sunday when we clinched, that there's nothing like that when you're standing there and you found out you're the world champion with your guys all in front of you. So that's another great thing I love about funny cars.
Yeah. Well, and let's be real. The fans love the funny cars too. Come on.
Yeah.
Let's be real.
I'd love to go back to Top Fuel someday.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I got one you can drive. It's sitting in my shop. So if you ever really get excited about driving a Top Fuel car.
Front engine or rear engine?
That's rear engine.
Oh,
yeah, it's still sitting there. It's ready to rock and roll. It's got Ron Cap's name on it. I see your wife at the track a lot now, so that's great to see. As being a team owner, has that led into your family being more involved at the racetrack now?
Yeah, back when the kids were young, we took them out of school and we took them motorhome. A lot of great memories, Great Wolf Lodges, and just a lot of fun around the races. And I've always tried real hard to work my appearances with sponsors, with taking my family to those appearances and trying to keep that. But the race, as the kids, you'll learn soon, as the kids get that certain age from kindergarten on, you can't just take them out of school. So we've had to, it's been a bummer for them not to go to some races. So my wife stopped going to a lot of them, but of course, maybe a quarter of them being the West Coast. And now as a team owner, she's very involved, payroll and insurance and all that stuff. And we have a huge hospitality area. So she's going to more and more races now. But yeah, it's been hard. Early on, it was hard. And you got to remember, I drove for Don Prudhomme. The Copenhagen car and the school car, we had, if you remember all the models that they would have there.
Oh,
the
of course.
Copenhagen girls, the Skoal girls. So
I remember.
My poor wife, it was a great sponsor and it was
tough.
Fantastic to have, but she really was a trooper through all that. I mean, I look back at some of the pictures. I'm like, my God, I don't think I could have done that if she was involved in something the other way around. So, I'm very lucky that she stuck by me throughout all these years. And we met before I was a driver, so it's not like I was a famous funny car driver before we hooked up.
Yeah, you mentioned the Skoal and the girls, but I always remember, I remember that I would, when you had the Brute sponsorship.
Yeah.
You had the Brute girls out there.
I see a trend here. We had models for every one of my sponsors.
You did. And you guys would always have Brute poured in the pipes. I remember all that stuff. All these years with NAPA, what an incredible relationship and sponsorship. Is there an end to this thing, or what's going on? Because it seems like y'all are married. What's going on?
Don't say that. It has been crazy because we grow up and we see these long relationships. Kenny Bernstein and Budweiser stands out.
Oh yeah,
and you wonder, how does somebody do that? And I got to tell you, when I became or wanted to become a team owner, I'd made the decision. I want to let Don and everybody know the year before at Indy. And we weren't sure. We had some leads on some sponsors. We were hoping NAPA would come along as a small, if anything. And then I'll never forget that year, getting right after Pomona, I got a phone call. It was a little dumpy hotel at a NAPA appearance in the middle of Kansas, and my wife was with me. And I got a phone call from NAPA headquarters basically asking if they could continue on being the major primary sponsor as me going into being a team owner. And I cried. Sure. I hung up the phone and my wife looked at me, and I remember the smell, the terrible smell in this room because it was a divey hotel.
Sure.
But it's funny how I remember that like it was yesterday. Yeah. And I hung the phone up going, my God, this is what we needed. And everything's going to be okay from here on out. But
that's right.
Yeah, I don't know. I wake up every morning as a NAPA employee and I approach the day like that. And it's worked out. It's a great company.
Yeah, well, you've been an incredible ambassador, and so I'm sure the relationship's got many, many more years left in it. There's no question.
I hope so.
Yeah. What's your best memory with your family at the racetrack or involved with racing? Let's start.
You got to remember, my mom drove when I was a kid. So growing up, there was Shirley Muldowney, but I'd already had a Shirley Muldowney in my life. Like my dad growing up, when they met, he had fast street cars and rolling around the local drag strip. He got more pleasure out of putting my mom, who's 4'8", putting blocks on the pedals and going out and racing these guys and beating them with my mom driving. So she was very legendary in our area as a driver when I was a kid. So she even drove a front engine dragster. We had this little track in Santa Maria back there. My dad was kind of the local guy everybody went to. Sure. He had an altered when we were growing up. So my favorite moments are when my mom and dad are able to be around a big moment. Pomona clinching a championship. Thankfully, it happens at Pomona every year. So those 3 championships, of having them there to relish in that is probably the best moments for me, especially my mom, because she's done so much for us as kids. And I learned to pack a chute when I was 4 years old from my mom. So those moments are big.
Yeah.
Now we have a hashtag and everything for her. So I mean, she's she loves Antron. She makes her ways around the pit area. I come to find out every night. I hear from Tony Stewart, and your mom came by. But it's I've talked more and more about it, and I joked, but it's not. I'm sure I was conceived in the parking lot at what is now called the March Meet. It's the U.S. Fuel and Gas Championships, because we went there every year, and the timing is just about right when I was born. So that was my childhood. I'm sure she was on the starting line at the March meet with me in her belly, and so those moments of growing up, getting to go to the drag strip with my mom and dad are very cool.
So did your mom ever give you a hard time? Be like, let me drive this funny car. Did she ever do
She's
that?
never said that.
Yeah.
But she could probably still get in a car and still get it on.
That's fantastic, you know, and nothing beats mom, you know, I'll say that forever. Nothing beats mom. And so did your mom race competitively, or was she just kind of a street racer and race around Southern California?
Street racer. And I got pictures of a Chevelle my dad had in like 64, 65, 66 at the old Santa Maria track, and she's driving it and with trophies. I mean, always leaving with trophies. So it's funny to hear from other people that they raced my mom. I got their butts kicked by my mom back in the day. And she didn't just drive, she won a lot.
Some quick questions here to Ron Capps. And the first one is simply this: who's your favorite funny car driver?
Oh my gosh. It varies between Ed, the Ace McCulloch, and Don, the Snake Prudhomme. I got to go with Ace on this one.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Very good. And your favorite track to take your funny car down?
For me, it's Famoso, Bakersfield. The March meet, I grew up there going every year with my parents. The March meet, the U.S. Fuel and Gas Championships, watching, because that was as big. They say, the drivers, a lot of them, that besides Indy, that was a race that back then you wanted to win more than most national events. And for me as a kid going every year to see the Garlets tow out from Florida and race Connie from Michigan and get it on against Warren, Coburn, and Miller and the Blue Max and just all that, there wasn't a better track.
Fantastic. Now, I think I know the answer to this one, but what is your favorite funny car of all time?
That, I went Ace or Snake on my favorite driver, but I got to go with the Army funny car of Don Prudhomme's. I built a lot of those models, as you probably did as well.
Oh, yeah.
But that and the Revolution Ace's car are two of my favorites, but the Army car was pretty darn cool. I mean, I was like 7 years old, and I wanted to go in the Army just because I saw that car. So,
well, that was the goal, right?
Yeah,
the Army knew what to do. And so, looking back, what's your favorite race of all time? Your favorite funny car race? Who was the driver in the lane? Describe it to us. Tell us.
My race or watching a race?
No, you're in the seat.
Oh, I'm in the seat.
You're in the seat of the hot rod.
Gosh. That's a great, probably winning Indy with the Hot Wheels car. We did the whole throwback with Don Prudhomme and having him there throughout the weekend, and the way the weekend built, and we were qualified okay, and then it was hot, and just the Snake hadn't been to a full weekend like that in a long time, and driving for him all those years, he was riding the waves with us throughout the day and in between runs, and it was very cool to get his. It was almost like he was working for me, and he's just hanging out, and the way that we went through that, and then we won. When I got back to the starting line, that moment when he hugged me and got a cigar out and lit it was like, I don't think I have ever had a more favorite moment driving a race car.
Yep. It was saying thank you. And describe what it's like to drive a funny car in just 15 short seconds.
Oh, my God. I always tell people, you ever lean back in a chair, like you're in a stool or something, you lean back, and all of a sudden you almost fall. And that one quick moment of your stomach and your anxiety and that feeling you get, it's like that 3.85 seconds of a 3.8 second run.
Sure.
Right? And you can attest to this.
Oh, yeah.
It is that feeling of, I don't know what is going on and I don't know what's coming next.
Yeah.
That's a funny car ride.
That is a funny car ride. You know, we love talking funny cars with Ron Capps, but y'all, it's time to pop the chutes. And so, Ron,
this was fun. I appreciate you having me. I'm blessed to be able to do this for 30 years, but to be in the sport of drag racing and be part of it is pretty cool. To have NAPA Auto Parts obviously sign on with me as a team owner is crazy. But to turn on the TV and still watch myself in a funny car is one of those pinch me moments. So I'm very blessed, and I appreciate you having me on here. It's about time we had a show.
That's right.
With funny cars.
That's right.
Right? And you're perfect for it.
Well,
so
thank you.
I look forward to not racing you as much as we already had.
That's right. That's
Maybe
right.
final rounds.
That's right.
But thanks for having me on, and I can't wait to watch every episode.
Stay tuned. We have more incredible interviews coming your way right here on Talkin' Funny Cars with Buddy Hall. Thank you.